Good morning, Panos, and it's a pleasure
Good morning. Hi.
to see you. And after the call, I've been thinking about your contribution, and I've been thinking about talking again, because this is a very delicate time, and you're a person that I believe studies the human side of things. In fact, I like you to share your what your PhD, what you've been specializing on in these last 40 years, basically from the beginning of your career. So give us a little bit of background on your specialty.
Okay. So very briefly, I've been in education for 40 years, okay? And my main environment of activity has been engineering, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the human side of things. So apart from teaching engineering, I was also part for over like 15 or more years in Johannesburg with the then Gifted Child Center, which was an environment in a university setting where we'd had an opportunity to deal with individuals, youngsters from high school in particular, who were really advanced, very gifted. So we could try different things. We would try special courses with them. So I started off like that. Then following that, I had the opportunity to do a lot of neuro-linguistic training, NLP. So I'm now a registered international NLP trainer, which is a fantastic, well, for me at least, qualification, because it gives me the opportunity to interrogate what is going on in the back of people's minds, not what they think consciously. This is important, which eventually led me to my PhD work, which was in South Africa in an engineering setting, what we call our National Control Center, where the purpose was to identify what it is that those experts do, which they themselves are not aware of, but determine their decisions. Now, in the current climate, obviously, we are all subject to this. Something happens, coronavirus this, or we're on lockdown that, and people react, but nobody questions the kind of interpretations that spontaneously come up for each one of us.
Yes.
If I get up in the morning and feel a certain way, I don't go, who is this? I know it's me because it feels familiar. In a similar way, all the ideas that arise in my mind, I never question them, most of the time anyway, because to me, they are familiar ideas. To me, this is how life is. I don't have any reason to think about it. However, at times like this, it's our thinking that determines our reaction. And as a result, being confined, and I'm specifically referring to a lockdown situation where people are confined with themselves, right? If they're having, there's a joke that says, if you are on your own and you're having a bad experience, clearly you're in bad company, which is sort of like to say, well, if your own mind has run away with you and you have a whole lot of emotional experiences which are unpleasant, the opportunity or the good news is you can interact with that, and therein lies the freedom. So I hope this kind of gives you a general background.
Yeah, and even based on that, because you know me and you know what I work on, and I think one of the things that I've been always fascinated is what influences our behavior that we're not aware of, and I think you're exactly in that aisle, and I believe it's quite an interesting thing, because right now at least in me there are many different moments. There's the moment of excitement, there's the moment of depression, and they alternate quite often in the daytime. So there's a lot that is moving inside, because I cannot move outside. I cannot go around, and so everything.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So, you see, at this point, I would like to make something else, let's say, explicit, or make it clear, because this is key to our discussion. Okay. Now, there are a lot of people who've been doing a lot of research in neuroscience. One of them is a guy called Anil Seth, S-E-T-H. You can look him up on YouTube and so on. He's at a university in London. But let me paint this picture for you, right? If you consider the amount of time that it takes for photons to excite the eye and send a signal to the back of the brain where the visual processing center is, and you compare it to the amount of time that it takes for sound to go from the eardrum to the audio center, which is much closer, or even, let's say, smell, the olfactory sensor, nerve, whatever you want to call it, is inside the nose, but the place where the information gets processed is right in the middle of the brain. It's even closer still. just from this simple example, without any complicated science behind it, it must be clear to all of us that since these signals arrive at different times, how then is it that you see me and hear me and everything else at once? The only conclusion, and again, there's a lot of science behind this, I'm giving you the 3-minute summary here, is that you're not actually seeing me. You are projecting this image after all this information is put together, made into a coherent whole, and then it is, in inverted commas, projected inside your head. This is, don't take this literally, it's okay. So what that means is that each and every one of us is living in a slightly different version of the world around us. Your interpretation and mine is based on neural processes, plus, on top of that, all your life experiences, which at this moment are out of your conscious awareness.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
So basically, in essence, it's like we look at the same thing, but we don't see the same thing because we're influenced by our background, we're influenced by what we believe, and our perceptions are different. So, you know, we all look at the same thing and we don't see the same thing. And that's actually the reason why I'm trying to do these calls, because, you know, I want to look around the world and see the different understanding or the different experience of the situation, because this situation, at least for us in Italy, is protracting now. Yesterday they said we're going to go after Easter, but you know, at the same time we have a reason number of infected, while the number of dead people is stable, kind of decreasing and increasing, but it stays on the same time. So there is not real shift. There is not a radical move that will tell you, oh, now this is a different experience. So it's interesting to see TV and to see the news and to see everybody making all kinds of conclusions based on what's uncertain, based on the result every day that are not telling us a real precise direction. So, you know, we're in the middle of it, and people are reacting different ways, and we're in the lockdown. As I told you before, you know, I go from excitement to depression in an hour range, and then the kids, you know, and then the family, you know, that sometimes you realize how much it's good to have our job and go out and come back and to give a break to each other, even for them. I mean, I feel for them, because to have me for the full day at home is it's a big it's a big thing.
Yeah,
so,
it's a challenge. Yeah.
So what do you see from your side about these things that are happening there in South Africa? I mean, how is people reacting to these? I don't know. Are you in a lockdown already? Is that enforced?
Yeah. We've been in lockdown for a week now.
Okay.
And the reactions have been varied. Generally, the people that live in houses, let's say like this, have the luxury of being isolated. In other words, I can stay at home because I have a home. The majority of South Africans are living in very constrained conditions. Okay, I live in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, all the big cities. Right. They have what we call townships attached to them. Now, these are people that some of them live in shacks that are literally one room big. Now, and they're not even, most of them are not even made of bricks. They're made of corrugated iron and wood and such, which is not pleasant, in other words, especially when the sun is making the thing like an oven. How are you going to spend the day there? You can't. Plus, you're on top of each other. I mean, how do you isolate yourself if your neighbor is literally 2 meters away, right? So in that environment, the reactions have been very different to what they've been, let's say, in the suburbs. Also, there's a different attitude, and again, I'm generalizing in a big way here, between the two groups of people, simply because their daily requirements are different. If your life depends on you working today, and someone tells you for 3 weeks you can't work, how on earth are you going to get money to buy food? And so it's a very diverse environment that we're living here. Up Africa, as you know from the previous interview that we had, it's even worse, where they have no facilities at all. So a lot of people are, in inverted commas, disregarding this because the other priorities in their life are much higher. And so we got to kind of somehow find a balance. Look, again, my own opinion on this, or my own experience of this, is that this confinement, as far as I'm concerned, is a good thing, because it brings everybody face to face with themselves. Normal day-to-day life, we've all become habituated of being happy as an outcome of either doing or having things. If I have a better car, I'm happy. If I go on holiday, I'm happy. If I'm the person with the person that I like, I'm happy, and so on. So it's always happiness, and again, this is a big topic, but to summarize it, is conditional to activities or objects that we have. Now, suddenly, we are forced to consider alternative ways. Now, the media is not helping at all, because the stories are, oh, this is spreading, oh, this one is dying, oh, disaster, oh, the economy. It's a bunch of nightmares, right? So now the individual who doesn't have the ability or the interest even to look inside their mind, to observe, and this is the key word, observe. The observation is the medicine, as it were. Thoughts and emotions arising as if they're watching a movie or the TV or something like that. That person is doomed, because whatever information is in front of them, they will interpret it in such a way that they have no control over. And there comes the real suffering. So we have the opportunity, I'm suggesting now, being confined physically, to have some time put aside every day to experiment observing thoughts and feelings as they arise. Then perhaps one might have the opportunity to interact with information such as news from the TV and so on in a different way. Now, let me stress this. If you are under stress, if your brain is perceiving a threat, it literally shuts down. All your higher brain functions go out the window, which means that your ability to find solutions is diminished. So you're basically shooting yourself in the foot every time you unconsciously fall into depression, as you put it, and you don't have a way to dig yourself out of that hole.
Right.
So it becomes even more important now to have the ability to step out of these negative mind states.
So let me bring it back to a little bit of a practicality here, because there's one thing, as you said, is to stop and look at your own interpretation, which is very healthy. Yes. And the other thing is what the media is filling up with, and as you said, the media is giving us a lot of information that we see as, ourselves as out of control in some ways, and so we don't find good solutions. Seems like there's a proposed solution from the media that we shouldn't abide by, but we should basically look at our own way of experiencing this thing and then choose our own solution. And I'd like for you to expand on what do you mean by solution in that case, because there's a lot of, understanding, even who's looking at us, it may come up with their own understanding of what we're saying. So, just
Absolutely.
make it a little more clear, practical if possible.
Yeah. So let's first of all establish that there's no such a thing as one solution for everyone. It's impossible, because where you are, where I am, where everybody else is at is completely different. So from our point of view, the primary commodity, the thing that should be the most valued right now, is the ability for individuals to find creative solutions by themselves. Now, obviously, within the constraints of some government regulations and other prevailing conditions and so on. But what I'm really stressing is, now more than ever, it's important for individuals, you, me, anybody who's watching this, to find ways to inspire themselves to find creative solutions. In the past, a lot of us went along by what others said, the leadership, the government, whoever it is, the church, I don't know, whatever. Someone else giving direction. Here I'm suggesting the solution, in my opinion, lies in individuals discovering how do they put themselves in a state which is inspired and in such a way creative as to find the best solution under their own circumstances. Now, let me give you an example.
Please.
Okay. Yesterday, in the area that I live, there is a spring. It's a natural spring, which the government has put a fence around and put taps that people can go and take water for their own home use. So as usual, I got in the car, I got all my plastic bottles, and I went down to the spring to find that it was locked. Now, the person who's responsible said to me, sorry, I can't let you in, because if I let you in, everybody else will complain, it's locked, it's done. Now, I could have said, this, that, the other, whatever, I got angry or frustrated, or now what I'm going to do, despair and all that. I thought to myself, okay, this is a situation. What are the alternatives? Now, I had a moment. I went and parked the car and sat down thinking, okay, what am I going to do? Let me see my options. Well, one option is I can go and buy water. Okay, fine. Or what else can I do? I can get a filter. Okay, fine. Then, suddenly, as I was in that state, I had an idea. I thought, wait a minute. The water that feeds this spring comes from a place literally 150 meters higher up in the same suburb. I thought, let me go and have a look and see what's happening there. Now, this idea came out of, as we say, out of the blue. So I took the car, I drove to that spot, and sure enough, the water there is flowing freely. There's no regulation, there's no fence around it, it's just water flowing. I filled up all my bottles and I went home. Now, looking from that spot downward where the official spring is, it's literally 150 meters. Now, I thought to myself, wow, how interesting is this? If I hadn't taken a moment, literally 2 minutes, to sit down and think, okay, what are my options? And be calm and just allow my mind to do its thing, I would have never found this simple solution to the problem.
No, but one thing I like to...
I hope that helps. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'd like to stretch one thing, though. Why did the government close the water if the water was good? I mean, that's another thing that I...
Because they don't want people to go and congregate, because they stand in a queue and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. So that's...
But I mean, again, it's irrational. Doesn't matter. What I'm saying is I could have got angry. Oh, how dare they? This is the water. I could have had a reaction. I thought, okay, reaction, nothing. The situation is, this is locked. What else can I do? And so, in the thinking of alternatives, my mind went to another state, and then the solution appeared.
So basically what you're saying is, when something that you don't like or you don't accept happens, you better not react to it, but stop and rely on your rational, way of thinking about it, your reasoning that will eventually help you not to get upset or not to react to them, but also find a solution. And I gotta say this, even if you don't find a solution, that's the best response, because to react to the other, you just get upset about what, and then you're gonna go back home, and then you're gonna complain about the government, then you're gonna do all those things that blame others for your state. While reasoning,
and you get more and more angry, and you get to nowhere.
Right. So
let me just say something. Sorry, just a little practical add-on to what you've said. It's really important for the people listening to this to understand a simple fact: reaction will happen. Why? Because the reactive part of the brain is faster than the conscious part of the brain. The reaction will happen. The control we have is how long will it last. Now, when I say how long, I'm talking about the chemistry that is released during the time of reaction. So if I catch myself reacting, which I did in this example that I gave you, I went and parked the car and said, okay, I'm under reaction conditions. The chemistry in my brain, in my body, is going to last for at least 5 or 10 minutes because I caught it early, right? So I could, knowing this information, I had the presence of mind to sit quietly and wait. And I could feel it in my body. The anger and the thing slowly dissipated. Then only is the creative mind able to function. This is critical, because if people try to tell themselves, oh, don't react, that's nonsense. It can't be done. They will react. The thing is, be mindful of the reaction, feel the feelings, let them subside, then step for two solutions.
So once again, you have to, because this is very interesting, because reactive mechanisms are everywhere, and I am, in those often. So what you're saying is reaction happens because that's a function of our brain. So the point is to, like before you said, observe ourselves and just see where we are and just be able to interrupt the state. So, just to NLP saying, but interrupt the state by, stop and think and not give room to the reaction, because if you give room to the reaction, maybe it will amplify itself, taking over and bringing it to a further and making it longer in time. And then in the reaction, often we do a lot of things that we regret afterwards, also. So that's a very...
Well, this is the thing. This is a critical point. You see, the easiest way, and again, there's hundreds of different ways, the easiest way to disrupt the state, as you put it, is simply this. You take a deep breath through your nose, and there's reasons for that. I'm not going to go into it. So you breathe in. The important thing is to feel the breath right in the middle of your gut, in the bottom of your abdomen. You must feel that part of your body expanding. Hold the breath for a couple of seconds, then breathe out through the mouth. Do this a few times. I mean, this is the simplest way to activate what they call the vagus nerve, to disrupt the stress state. I don't want to go into the details. The point is, you're creating a physiological handbrake or release mechanism like a pressure valve, which allows all the stress hormones and stuff to dissipate. So this anyone can do. There's no magic or trick to it. Anyone can just do it. Okay. What I'm saying is even things, simple things like music. If you have a favorite song or something that you really enjoy, if you play it often enough to remind you of that way of being, it gives you the chemistry of inspiration. I mean, these are simple things that we're talking such simple things that it's too simple, except if you become mesmerized or completely, hypnotized by what the media are saying and the fears that arise in your mind and, oh, what's going to happen to me and all that kind of stuff, well, then it becomes a problem because you're at the mercy of your own mind. And so being alert and awake, being mindful, as some people say, is really critical these days.
Yes. Now I'm gonna close the call right now because there's so much in it. But I'm gonna request, that we could actually do another one maybe next week, or just keep being with people or with each other, because that really helped me also. Because I was into arguments lately much more than I was at the first week of the lockdown with my wife and the kids. So it's actually very helpful because once you're here, you have to stay here. You have to cope with it, and this is not just coping with it. This is more like drawing good out of a situation that if you react, it's going to become bad for everybody. So, I really thank you for these tips. And I'm going to say, let's talk in a week time and see how this situation brings us and how can we take the crisis.
Let me just say one last thing before we go. Please. Right? So we said breathing helps, music helps. Another thing that's really important is to find an activity. It could be, I don't know, sewing. It could be drawing. It could be reading. It could be whatever, which you can do in a confined space. Because if your mind is not focused, and again, there's science behind this, there's reasons how the mind works and all that. If you don't have something to put your attention on, your mind roaming like a searchlight in the wild will find trouble. You say the first week with the wife and the kids was more difficult than it is now, because in the beginning, nobody had a focus in themselves. They were focusing on each other. And then you always find fault and things happen and you go out of hand. So the third thing that I would say to conclude this discussion is also see if you can find an activity that you enjoy doing that allows you to be in a good state by yourself. So these are the three things: breathing, let's say music or some distracting, pleasant thing, and finally an activity that you enjoy doing confined.
Well, thank you, Panos, and this was quite helpful and hopefully quite practical, because this has to be something that anybody can be able to apply. And in a confined space, as you said, we need to find simple things that have the best impact ever. So thank you again, Panos. We'll talk soon. All right?
Pleasure, man. Pleasure. Nice to talk to you. Ciao.
Nice to talk to you.